I still remember the sound that wasn't there. The kind of silence that hums inside your chest when everything you love has already walked away. That was the sound of my last Christmas alone. The fire was still alive in the fireplace, but the house had gone cold long before the snow began to fall. I sat by the window, watching the flakes dance under the streetlight, and I could almost hear her voice again, Grace, my wife. She used to hum the same carol every Christmas Eve, while the smell of cinnamon filled the kitchen. Now, only the ticking clock kept her rhythm. It's strange how a clock can be the loudest thing in a quiet house. Anna used to help her, back when laughter still belonged here. But that was years ago, before I turned into the man she called a grumpy old fool. The words still echo in my head like a cracked bell. She didn't mean to hurt me, not really. But sometimes the truth slips out in anger, and once it does, you can't put it back. That was the last time we spoke. I had bought her a gift that year. A simple thing, wrapped in blue paper with trembling hands. But she left before I could give it to her. I still have it, tucked away inside the drawer by my bed. I never opened it again. Never wanted to. Because every time I looked at that box, it whispered the same question: how did love turn into silence? The neighbors were having their celebrations that night. I could hear their laughter through the walls, muffled but alive. Someone popped open a bottle, children ran across frozen lawns, the church bell rang faintly in the distance. And here I was, just me, an empty chair, and the memory of what once was a family. Funny thing is, I wasn't always like this. I used to believe Christmas could fix anything. That if you wished hard enough, if you put enough hope into a night like this, miracles might find you. But hope gets quieter as you get older. It hides behind wrinkles, behind empty plates, behind words you wish you'd said sooner. That night, I made myself a cup of coffee burnt, too bitter, and stood by the window until the first light of morning. I thought about calling Anna. I thought about saying, I'm sorry. But pride is heavier than forgiveness, and I'd carried mine for too many winters. Maybe that's why I noticed it, the faint sound of bells far away, carried by the wind. Or maybe it was just my heart, reminding me that time was still moving. That there was still a chance, if I dared to take it. And so it began. The night I never expected would change everything. The night when silence finally spoke back. The morning after that silent night came slowly, as if even the sun felt tired of shining for me. The snow outside had turned to a crust of ice, and the light creeping through the curtains made the room look older, emptier. I sat at the table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the half-burned candle from the night before. It had melted unevenly, like a small, exhausted heart. There's something cruel about mornings after Christmas. The world outside looks beautiful, children laughing, people cleaning up their driveways, families sharing leftovers, but for some of us, it only reminds us of what we've lost. I walked to my bedroom, every step echoing in that hollow house. There's a drawer I rarely open. The one that holds the pieces of my life before everything fell apart. Inside, folded beneath old letters and a photograph of Grace holding Anna as a baby, there was the box. Blue wrapping paper, faded now, tied with a red ribbon. The gift I never gave. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding it in my hands. My fingers trembled, not because of age, but because of the weight of memory. I could almost see Anna's face the night she left, her eyes wet with anger and sadness, calling me a grumpy old man. She had stormed out after another argument about Anthony, her husband. I never thought he was good enough for her. Maybe I was jealous, maybe I was just afraid she'd stop needing me. Grace used to tell me I loved too hard but showed it too poorly. I think she was right. When she passed, something inside me went cold, and I tried to fill that space with silence, thinking it would hurt less. But silence doesn't protect you, it only builds walls. I placed the box beside me and opened the drawer further. There were old photographs, Christmases when we were still a family. Grace wearing that red scarf I gave her on our first year together, Anna smiling with frosting on her cheeks, our dog Max sleeping by the tree. I felt the years closing in on me, pressing against my chest like the cold. Then, the phone rang. The sound startled me, cutting through the stillness like a blade. I hesitated before answering. It was a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I hoped it was Anna. But it wasn't. It was the pastor from the church reminding me of the Christmas charity dinner that evening. I had ignored their invitations for years. Still, something in his voice, gentle but insistent, made me say I'd think about it. After hanging up, I looked at the box again. It was such a small thing, yet it carried years of regret. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. The day passed quietly. I fixed the hinge on the kitchen door just to keep busy, made soup I didn't eat, and watched snowflakes drift past the window. Every now and then, I thought of calling Anna. But every time I reached for the phone, my pride froze my hand. As evening fell, I lit the fire again. The same chair, the same silence. Only now, the box sat on the table across from me, as if it were waiting for an answer. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey Grace never liked when I drank and stared at the flames until they blurred. Then came the memory. It was 3 Christmases ago. Anna and Anthony had come over for dinner. Grace had already been gone a year. The air in the house felt heavy, as if her absence lingered in every corner. I tried to make small talk, but everything I said came out wrong. Anthony was polite, trying to keep things calm, but I saw the way Anna looked at me, disappointed, tired. When she handed me a gift, I barely said thank you. I remember muttering something about her wasting money. Then I gave her mine, a clumsy wooden frame I'd carved, with a picture of Grace inside. She smiled politely, but I could see the sadness behind it. Later that night, I told Anthony he wasn't taking good enough care of her. The words came out sharper than I meant. Anna defended him. I shouted. She shouted back. Then came that line, the one that still haunts me. "You've become a bitter, grumpy old man, Dad. Mom wouldn't even recognize you." She was right. But I didn't say a word. I just stood there, stone-faced, as she packed her things and left. That was the last time I saw her. The fire cracked, pulling me back to the present. I realized I was crying, something I hadn't done in years. The tears burned as they fell, not from sadness alone, but from the shame of knowing how wrong I'd been. Outside, the wind began to howl, carrying the faint sound of distant laughter from the houses down the street. Somewhere, a church bell chimed. I closed my eyes and whispered her name, Anna, just to hear how it sounded after all these years. When I opened them, I saw the box again. I don't know what made me do it, loneliness, guilt, or maybe just the need to feel something real, but I untied the ribbon. Inside was a small golden locket. I had engraved her mother's initials on one side and Anna's on the other. It was meant to be a reminder that they were always connected, even when one of them was gone. I held it up to the firelight, and for a moment, it seemed to glow. I could almost hear Grace's voice again, soft and forgiving. "It's not too late, Samuel." It never is. I closed my fist around the locket and made a promise to myself. Tomorrow, I would find a way to see her. Even if she turned me away, even if she couldn't forgive me, I needed to try. But as I placed the locket back inside the box, I noticed something else beneath it, a folded letter. My handwriting. I didn't remember putting it there. When I opened it, I saw the words written years ago but never sent. Anna, I'm sorry. The room went silent again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. That night I barely slept. The letter lay on the table beside my bed, staring back at me like an unfinished prayer. I must have written it after Grace died, those first months when every sound in the house echoed too loudly and I didn't know what to do with my hands. The ink had faded a little, but the words still carried the same weight. Anna, I'm sorry for not being the man your mother believed I was. When I woke, the world outside was covered in a clean white silence. Snow had fallen again, soft and thick, as if the earth wanted to hide all the things I'd broken. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching my breath fog the glass. Somewhere down the street, a child's laughter broke the morning. I wondered if that's what peace sounded like. I thought about calling Anna. Again. But fear is a stubborn thing. It grows roots in the cracks of your heart. What if she hung up? What if she'd moved on completely? So instead, I read the letter one more time. The words felt raw, clumsy. I wasn't good with feelings, never had been. Grace was the bridge between me and our daughter. When she left this world, the bridge collapsed, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. I remember the day Grace got sick. It was late November, the air already sharp with winter. She had always been the strong one, the one who could carry the weight of everyone else's sorrow. But that year, I saw her hands shake as she decorated the tree. She brushed it off, said it was nothing, but her eyes told me otherwise. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. I visited her every day, holding her hand, pretending not to see the fear hiding behind her smile. One night she said to me, "Promise me, Samuel, promise me you'll never close your heart to Anna." I did promise. And then I broke it. After Grace's funeral, the house became a museum of her absence. Her red scarf still hung on the chair, her perfume lingered in the bedroom, her favorite mug sat by the sink for weeks. Anna tried to fill the silence with company, with Anthony. She would bring him over, trying to keep some light alive between us. But I saw him as an intruder, someone stealing the last piece of her I still had. I was cruel to him. Too cruel. Every time he spoke, I found fault in his words. I criticized his job, his manners, even the way he held her hand. I thought I was protecting her, but really, I was protecting my pain. Anthony never fought back, he just took it, for her sake. I know now that was strength, not weakness. I remember one evening clearly. It was snowing, and the three of us sat around the fireplace. Grace's old Christmas records played softly. Anna had made cocoa, and Anthony was telling some story about his work. I wasn't listening. I was staring at the empty chair where Grace used to sit. And when Anna laughed, God, she had her mother's laugh, it broke something in me. Because for a moment, I felt happy, and then I remembered that Grace was gone. I got up and left the room without saying a word. I didn't know how to exist in joy anymore. The light had gone out too soon, and I was still walking in the dark. That memory hit me like a wave as I stood in the kitchen now, years later. The locket, the letter, the snow, all of it pulled me backward. I realized that what hurt the most wasn't that Anna left. It was that I'd given her a reason to. The day stretched on quietly. I went to the market, nodded at familiar faces who didn't recognize me anymore, and bought a loaf of bread I barely ate. The young cashier smiled and said, "Merry Christmas, sir." I tried to smile back, but it felt wrong on my face. When I returned home, the answering machine light was blinking. For a moment, my heart jumped. But it wasn't Anna. It was Mrs. Thompson, my old neighbor. She was calling about the church service that evening. Her voice was warm, like a blanket. "We'd love to see you, Samuel. You don't have to be alone tonight." Alone. That word again. It had followed me for a decade, whispering in every room. Maybe that's why I put on my coat and boots without thinking. Maybe that's why I grabbed the letter and tucked it into my pocket before leaving. The air outside bit at my cheeks. The sky was already turning violet, the kind of color that only comes before snow. As I walked down the street, lights flickered on in every window. Families gathered around tables, laughter spilling out into the night. I wondered if Anna's house looked the same. If she was sitting beside her tree right now, wrapping presents, smiling at Anthony. When I reached the small wooden church, the bells were ringing. Their sound rolled across the town, soft and forgiving. Inside, it was warm, filled with the smell of pine and wax. People greeted me kindly, surprised to see me after so long. I sat near the back, feeling both present and invisible. Mrs. Thompson spotted me and came over, her eyes lighting up. "Samuel. Well, look who decided to join the living again." Her laugh was gentle, and somehow it didn't hurt. She patted my shoulder. "You've been missed, you know." I smiled faintly. "I doubt that." "Nonsense," she said. "No one's forgotten you. Least of all the good Lord." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But her words lingered as the choir began to sing. The carols filled the small church, wrapping around me like something alive. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in years, I let myself remember Grace without pain. Just her voice, her kindness, her light. When the service ended, Mrs. Thompson handed me a small candle. "Take it home, Samuel. Let it burn tonight. Maybe it'll remind you that some lights never really go out." I walked back through the snow, the candle flickering in the cold wind, its tiny flame stubborn against the dark. And that's when I saw it, from across the street, through a curtain of falling snow, Anna's house. Bright, full of laughter, Christmas lights shimmering like stars. For a moment, I just stood there, hidden in the dark, watching my own daughter live the life I'd pushed away. The lights blurred through my tears, and I whispered to the wind, "Merry Christmas, Anna." But the wind didn't answer. Only the faint chime of a church bell followed me home. The candle Mrs. Thompson gave me burned quietly on the windowsill through most of the night. Its tiny flame danced against the frost-covered glass, defiant, like a whisper trying to be heard in a room that had grown too used to silence. I sat in my chair, the same one where Grace used to sit knitting, and listened to the house. There's a sound every old home has, the ticking of a clock that no one really pays attention to until they're alone. Ours hangs on the wall above the fireplace. Grace picked it out from an antique shop decades ago. Every hour, it gives a slow, solemn chime, as if it's grieving the time it keeps. That night, I heard every single tick. I stared at the letter again. The one meant for Anna. I could still smell the paper, old, dry, laced with something like regret. I read it for the 10th time, maybe more. Every sentence was a crack in the armor I'd built around myself. "Anna, I don't know how to say this in person, so I'm writing it down. I know I've failed you. I wasn't the father you deserved after your mother passed. I became someone she wouldn't have loved, and someone you couldn't talk to. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a moment." I folded it carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote her name on the front. My hand shook, not from cold, but from the weight of finally doing something I should have done years ago. The next morning was gray and heavy. The kind of winter sky that makes everything feel slower, quieter. I didn't eat. I just got dressed, took the letter, and walked. I didn't know exactly what I planned to do. Drop it in her mailbox? Leave it on the porch and walk away? Her house sat 3 blocks away. I passed it often, always from a distance, always pretending I wasn't looking. But this time, I let myself really see it. The lights were still up, blinking soft and warm. A snowman stood slightly crooked in the front yard. A child's glove had been left on the steps. I froze. Through the front window, I could see Anna, just a glimpse, laughing, her hand brushing back a loose strand of hair. She looked so much like Grace in that moment, it stole the breath from my lungs. And beside her, Anthony, holding their little boy on his lap, tickling him until he squealed with joy. That should have been my chair. That should have been my laughter too. I turned around. My feet moved before my heart could catch up. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I walked without thinking, until I found myself back at the church steps. The doors were open, warm light spilling out into the snow. Inside, Mrs. Thompson stood beside a table, organizing boxes of donated clothes. She looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. Back again? She asked gently. I couldn't leave the letter, I said. I froze. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Instead, she gestured to a chair. Sit, Samuel. You've walked a long way without moving. We sat in silence for a while, watching the flicker of votive candles near the altar. She eventually said, "You know, clocks don't stop just because we ignore them. Time keeps ticking. And hearts, well, they're a little like clocks, too." "I'm afraid it's too late," I said, my voice low. "She has a life now. One I'm not part of." Mrs. Thompson looked at me the way Grace used to, like she saw more than what I said. "Then find a way to be part of it again. One small step. That's all it takes." I nodded, quietly. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. Not loud, not bright. Just a flicker. But it was there. That night, back home, I placed the letter on my desk. I stared at it a long time. Then I wrote a second one. Shorter. Simpler. "Anna, if there's still a space for me at your table, I'd love to come. I miss you. I miss us." I didn't sleep much. But my heart felt lighter. You know, sometimes all it takes is one letter. One message. One small act of courage to change the story completely. Tell me something, where are you watching or listening to this story from right now? What part of the world holds your Christmas memories? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you're feeling this story, don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing more moments like this one together. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I shaved. Wore my old brown coat. The one Grace always said made me look almost respectable. I stood outside Anna's house again. The letter in my hand. No snowman this time. Just the cold air and my heartbeat. I walked up the steps and placed the envelope gently at the door. Before I could turn away, the door opened. And there she was. Anna. Her eyes met mine. And in that moment, time stopped. Anna stood in the doorway for what felt like a lifetime, the envelope between us like a wound neither of us wanted to touch. Her eyes held years I hadn't seen and something even harder to face, recognition. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She lowered her gaze, picked up the letter, and slowly closed the door. No words. No tears. No anger. Just the sound of the latch turning and the winter air filling the silence. I walked home slowly, feeling like I'd left something behind that I'd never get back. The letter was no longer mine. It was in her hands now, carrying all the words I never had the courage to speak when there was still time. I spent the rest of the morning in my chair, watching the fire die in the hearth. The clock ticked on the wall, marking time that felt more like loss than movement. By late afternoon, I couldn't stay inside any longer. I put on my coat and stepped into the snow, taking the long way through the old streets. I passed the park where Grace used to take Anna as a child. The bench was still there, covered in a layer of snow. I remembered one winter when Anna scraped her knee, and Grace lifted her like she was made of glass. I stood back, awkward, already unsure of how to be soft. I ended up near Anna's house again. Lights glowed in the windows, warm, inviting, untouched by the cold. Cars were parked out front. I heard voices, laughter, smelled roasted ham and cinnamon. I stood behind a tree, not hiding out of shame, but because I didn't know where else to go. I watched the life I had lost, still unfolding without me. The door opened. Anthony stepped out holding a tray. He laughed at something someone said inside, then turned and walked back in, returning with a small blue gift box wrapped with a red ribbon. My breath caught. It was the same kind of box I had once wrapped. Identical. My chest tightened. Anna appeared and handed it to him with a kiss on the cheek and a smile. And in that smile, I saw what used to be mine. I thought about leaving, but my feet wouldn't move. I stayed until the cold started to sting, until I wasn't sure if I was still real. Then I saw a small face at the window. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, eyes wide, nose pressed to the glass. He looked right at me. We locked eyes. And then, he smiled. Just like that. Pure. Innocent. A small hand lifted and waved. Maybe he didn't know who I was. Maybe he just saw an old man standing outside in the cold and thought kindness was the right thing to give. But that wave struck deeper than anything else. I waved back. And walked away. At home, I didn't light the fire. I didn't cook. I sat in the dark, listening to the outside world go on without me. Somewhere down the road, families laughed, bells rang, tires crunched over frozen roads. I picked up the original blue box still sitting on the shelf. The one I'd meant to give Anna years ago. I opened it again. The golden locket caught the last light coming in through the curtains. I touched the initials, Grace's and Anna's, and finally understood that this gift wasn't just meant for her. It was meant to remind me too. Of what still mattered. Of what could still be repaired. Somewhere outside, the church bell rang once, slow and solemn. I thought about walking there. Thought about sitting in the pews, just to hear something that made sense again. But I didn't go. I stayed where I was, unmoving, remembering the boy at the window. The wave. Mrs. Thompson's candle. Anna's eyes meeting mine after all those years. And if you're still here with me, listening to this story, tell me, where are you watching from? What Christmas memory still lives inside your heart? Leave it in the comments. And if this story has stirred something in you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more to come, and I think you'll want to hear it. I stayed up most of that night, sitting in the same chair, the blue box still open beside me. The locket resting in my palm felt heavier than it should have, like it carried everything I never said. Outside, the wind howled and pushed against the windows, but inside the house, there was only quiet. Not peace, just quiet. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I stood up and went to the bedroom. There was a drawer I hadn't opened in years. The kind of drawer you avoid because you know exactly what's inside. I opened it slowly, almost afraid the past would come spilling out. There it was. The letter. Folded twice, tucked inside an old envelope without a stamp. The handwriting was mine, but younger, shakier, like I'd written it while trying not to cry. I sat down on the bed, turned on the small lamp, and unfolded the paper. Dear Anna, I don't know where to begin. After your mother passed, I didn't know how to breathe anymore, let alone how to be a father. I know I failed you. I know I became someone you couldn't recognize. I saw you trying, I saw your hurt, and I said nothing. That silence was my cowardice. I wish I could tell you that I pushed you away to protect you, but the truth is, I was lost. Without your mother, I didn't know how to love properly. I didn't know how to open my mouth without breaking. And so, I said nothing. I did nothing. And that was worse than anything I could have said. But you need to know, I've loved you every day. I've never stopped. And I miss you. I miss you so much it hurts to breathe. Love, Dad. I stared at the letter for a long time. I remembered writing it 1 week after Grace's funeral. The house was filled with flowers, but it smelled like death. Everyone had gone home. Anna had stayed the night, slept on the couch. She cried quietly when she thought I couldn't hear. And I just sat in the kitchen, drinking cold coffee, writing those words I never gave her. I had planned to leave it on her pillow, but I couldn't. I folded it up, stuffed it in the drawer, and convinced myself I'd send it later. I never did. I pressed the letter against my chest, then slipped it into my coat pocket. This one wouldn't stay hidden any longer. Christmas morning came soft and gray. Snow was falling again, a light dust that made everything look like it had been wiped clean. I dressed carefully. Same coat, same scarf Grace once knit me, the one I never wore until now. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man there. I walked the few blocks to Anna's house, each step feeling heavier than the last. My boots crunched in the snow. My breath clouded in front of me. I wasn't sure if I'd knock on the door or just leave the letter and go. But when I turned the corner, something made me stop. Anthony's car wasn't in the driveway. The house was dark. Curtains pulled. It looked empty. I stood there a moment, uncertain, then turned back. On the way home, I passed the church again. The front doors were open. Mrs. Thompson was inside, arranging a table of food with volunteers. She looked up, saw me, and smiled like I'd just come back from war. "There's a plate with your name on it," she said. I nodded and stepped inside. I didn't eat, but I sat near the back, holding the envelope in my hands. The smell of roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry filled the small hall. People moved around me, families, couples, children laughing. I didn't belong there. But for some reason, I stayed. Later, I walked back home. The letter still with me. I placed it on the kitchen table and sat across from it. The fire was burning low. I poured myself a glass of water, took one sip, then another. I stared at the letter like it might get up and walk to her on its own. I couldn't help but wonder how many moments in life we ruin by saying nothing. How many doors we leave closed because we're too proud or too afraid. That letter could have changed everything. Years ago. But I buried it like I buried so many things. Then, around dusk, a sound outside. Tires on gravel. I went to the window. Anna's car. My heart stopped. I watched her get out, alone. She looked up at the house, uncertain. Her coat was the same one Grace bought her the year before she died. She stood still, then walked toward the door. I opened it before she could knock. We looked at each other, neither of us knowing what to say. She reached into her bag and pulled something out. It was the letter I'd left on her doorstep the night before. She didn't speak. She just handed it back to me, opened, unfolded, read. Then she reached into the other side of her bag and pulled out something else. The blue box. My box. The original. The one I had never given her. She said nothing. Just placed it in my hands. Her eyes were wet. So were mine. Her hands let go of the box slowly, as if releasing years of silence one finger at a time. I took it, held it tight, feeling its shape against my palms. It was exactly as I had left it, except now it had passed through her hands, through her heart. There was something different in the way she looked at me, soft, uncertain, but open. I stepped aside without saying a word. She walked in, slowly, scanning the house like she was searching for ghosts. The air between us was fragile. I could hear every creak of the floorboards under her feet, every breath she took. She walked toward the fireplace and paused, then reached out and ran her fingers gently across the mantel, where Grace's photo still stood. She turned to face me. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, steady. "You kept it." I nodded. I didn't know how to let it go. Her eyes dropped to the blue box still in my hands. Neither did I. We stood in silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. She looked older, tired in ways I hadn't seen before, but she was still Anna. My Anna. The same girl who used to fall asleep on my chest while Grace hummed carols from the kitchen. The same one who used to wait by the window for me to come home from the workshop, her little hand smudging the glass. "I read your letter," she said. I swallowed hard. She looked down. I cried through all of it. Then I read it again. I took a breath, steady but full. I should have sent it. "Yes," she said simply. No blame. Just truth. We sat down. Not too close, not too far. She reached for the box again and opened it without asking. Her fingers touched the locket inside. She held it in her palm, running her thumb gently over the initials. "I remember Mom wearing something like this." "It was hers," I said. "She asked me to give it to you." Anna's eyes shimmered. "When?" "The night before she." I paused, then finished softly. "She wanted you to have something that reminded you of her." "Of us." She nodded, then looked straight at me. "Why didn't you?" I looked at the fire, the shadows it cast, the quiet guilt crawling up my throat. "Because I couldn't face what I became. I didn't think I deserved to give you anything." There was a long pause. I expected her to stand, to leave, to close the door again like she had before. But she didn't. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded photo. She handed it to me. It was an old picture, Anna as a little girl, sitting on my shoulders, both of us laughing. Grace had taken it. I didn't even know it still existed. "I've kept this," she said. "Even when I hated you." I looked up. "I did hate you," she admitted. "For a long time. For pushing me away. For acting like you were the only one who lost her. But I never stopped missing you." The honesty in her voice cut deeper than anger ever could. I nodded. I had no right to argue. Then her eyes softened. Anthony doesn't know I'm here, she said. I told him I needed a moment alone. I think I needed to see you first. I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. He never told me to stay away from you, she added. That was my choice. But I regret it. Every year. Every Christmas. Outside, the snow had started again. Light, gentle. The kind that covers everything slowly, like forgiveness. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. You remember the snowman we used to build? She asked. I smiled, just a little. He always had a crooked smile. Because you never had the patience to shape the mouth. I stood beside her. We watched the streetlights flicker through the flakes. Then she said something I didn't expect. Come to dinner. I turned to her. What? Tonight. Anthony's cooking. Nathan would like to meet his grandfather. Nathan? She smiled. Our son. He's 5. I felt my knees weaken. I gripped the windowsill. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to fix everything tonight. Just be there. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the house, this quiet, hollow place I'd filled with memories and dust. Then I looked at her, standing there like a second chance. I don't know if I remember how to belong, I said. You don't have to, she replied. Just come. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. I'll leave the door unlocked, she whispered. 6 o'clock. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her, but this time, it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like an invitation. I stood there for a long time, the locket in one hand, the photo in the other. Then I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the shirt Grace had always liked on me, the dark blue one with the soft collar. I ironed it. I shaved. At 5:30, I lit the fireplace and let it burn one last time before I left. At 6 o'clock sharp, I stood outside Anna's house, heart thudding in my chest. The windows glowed. The same smell from the night before, spices, warmth, a hint of cranberry. I knocked once, then stepped inside. Nathan stood in the hallway, holding a toy car. He looked at me, wide-eyed. You're the man from the snow, he said. I smiled. I guess I am. Nathan stood there, his small hand gripping the toy car, eyes locked on mine like he was trying to remember where he had seen me before. I crouched down slowly, my knees creaking, and gave him a gentle smile. He took a step closer, still watching me, then held out the car. You wanna play? His voice was soft, curious, unafraid. I nodded and took the car into my hand, rolled it along the floor back to him. He laughed. That sound went straight through me like warm air through frozen glass. It had been so long since I'd heard joy that didn't belong to memory. Anna appeared in the hallway, watching us. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The way she looked at Nathan, then at me, was enough. Dinner's almost ready, she said quietly. Anthony emerged from the kitchen, apron still on, sleeves rolled up, face flushed from the heat of the oven. Our eyes met. There was no handshake, no forced pleasantries, just a brief nod. And somehow, in that one gesture, I knew we had made peace without a single word. The dining room was bright, the table set with mismatched plates and a centerpiece of pine branches and candles. Nathan climbed into his seat with the excitement only children seem to have for things we forget to appreciate. Anna poured wine into 2 glasses and water into a smaller cup for me, as if she remembered everything, even my old habits. I sat down slowly, unsure, like I was stepping into someone else's story. But the chair didn't reject me. It held me just the same. We ate. We passed dishes. We laughed at Nathan's stories, half of which made no sense and all of which made perfect sense to him. And for the first time in years, I tasted food I hadn't made myself in silence. Each bite felt like something sacred, like forgiveness resting on my tongue. After dinner, Anna brought out a small box wrapped in brown paper with a red ribbon. She placed it in front of me without saying anything. I stared at it. The last time someone handed me a gift, it ended with a door closing. I looked up at her. She nodded. I untied the ribbon with careful fingers. The paper opened slowly, as if the box itself knew this moment had waited long enough. Inside was a frame. Wooden. Familiar. It took me a second before I realized what it was. The frame I had given her all those Christmases ago. The one I carved with my own hands, clumsy and uneven. It still held the same photo, Grace smiling, Anna just a child, both of them looking directly at me from a moment that had stood still for decades. But now, the frame had been repaired. Polished. The cracks filled, the edges sanded. Anna had taken something broken and made it whole. I ran my fingers along the edges. My throat tightened. I never threw it away, she said, voice steady. I just didn't know how to look at it, until now. I wanted to speak, to thank her, to say something worthy of the moment. But I couldn't find the words. So I placed the frame beside my glass and let the silence speak for me. Then I remembered. The original blue box. The one I had carried for years and never dared to open until now. I stood and walked to the hallway, where I had left my coat. From the inner pocket, I pulled it out and brought it back to the table. Anna's eyes followed my every move. I set it down gently in front of her. It was always meant to be yours, I said. She didn't move for a moment. Then, with both hands, she lifted the lid and saw the locket. Her lips parted slightly. She reached in and held it up, the chain catching the light of the candles. Grace's initials on one side. Hers on the other. She opened it. Inside, a tiny photo of Grace holding baby Anna in her arms, both of them wrapped in a red scarf. I had cut it down to size myself, years ago, hoping she'd carry it with her. Hoping it would remind her of where she came from. Anna's hands trembled as she looked up at me. I thought you forgot her, she whispered. Never, I said. She stood, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around me. Not politely. Not cautiously. Fully. Tight. Like she was trying to pull time back through sheer will. And I held her, arms finally remembering how to close around something that mattered. Anthony cleared his throat quietly, stepping forward with a small box of his own. He handed it to me with an awkward smile. It's from both of us, he said. Inside was a photo album. Every page filled with pictures of Nathan. His first steps. His first Halloween. His first lost tooth. I flipped slowly, stunned by how much I had missed, how much they had wanted me to see even when I wasn't there to see it. On the last page, a photo I had never seen, Nathan in a red scarf, holding the same locket now around Anna's neck. On the back, one sentence written in Anna's handwriting. Come back. We're still here. I closed the album and looked at them both, Anna and Anthony. And then at Nathan, who had crawled into my lap without me noticing. He looked up at me and said, "Do you know how to build a snowman?" I smiled. "I'm a little rusty." "That's okay," he said. "I'll show you." The next morning, the world outside was wrapped in snow, fresh and untouched. It looked like someone had pressed pause on the chaos of life, just long enough for the world to remember how to breathe. The sky was soft gray, the kind that makes you whisper without knowing why. I stood by the window in Anna's kitchen, a mug of hot coffee in my hands, listening to the quiet rustle of the house waking up behind me. Nathan was humming something to himself, half tune, half giggle, while Anthony moved quietly between drawers. Anna came down the stairs wrapped in a blanket, hair a mess, eyes still puffy from sleep but peaceful. It had been years since I had seen this kind of morning. Not just the snow or the warmth of coffee, but this people moving around me, not away from me. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I wasn't watching through glass. I was here. After breakfast, Nathan tugged at my sleeve and insisted we go outside. He had already bundled himself in layers, looking like a walking pile of wool and excitement. I helped him put on his gloves, surprised at how easily my fingers remembered the motion. We stepped into the snow, and he immediately began shaping the base of a snowman. "Not too round," he warned. "Snowmen need to be lumpy." "Is that right?" He nodded with the certainty only 5-year-olds possess. Perfect lumps make happy snowmen. We built it together. Slowly. Carefully. I lifted the middle ball while he packed the top. Anna came outside after a while, her hands in her coat pockets, watching us with a look that said everything her mouth didn't need to. When we finished, Nathan clapped. "He needs a name." Anna grinned. "We used to name them Henry. Remember that, Dad?" I froze for a second. Then I smiled. Henry it is. We went to the Christmas Eve Mass that night. All of us. The small church was full of families wrapped in scarves and laughter. The air smelled like wax and pine, and the choir sang old hymns that seemed to echo straight into the chest. I sat between Anna and Nathan. Anthony sat beside her, and for the first time, I didn't feel smaller next to him. I didn't feel replaced. I felt home. When the priest began his sermon, he talked about time. How it slips quietly, how it leaves behind unanswered letters, unspoken words, unopened gifts. How Christmas wasn't about perfection, but presence. About returning. About trying again. He asked us to light our candles. One by one, the room bloomed with soft golden light. I looked down at my candle. Then at Anna's. She leaned closer and lit mine from hers. A small gesture. But to me, it was everything. Nathan leaned his head against my arm and whispered, "This is my favorite part." "Mine too, kid." The church bells rang at the end of the service. Clear and deep, their sound folding over the town like a blanket. I remembered that first bell I heard alone, just a few nights ago, through the cold and wind. And now here I was, not outside anymore, not forgotten. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. After the service, people hugged and laughed and stepped out into the snow. Mrs. Thompson found me by the door. Her eyes were watery, and her hands were shaking just a bit. "I knew you'd find your way," she said. I smiled and squeezed her hand. "Thank you." She nodded once. "Merry Christmas, Samuel." On the walk home, Nathan skipped ahead, making snow angels without waiting for permission. Anna held my arm, like she used to when she was little. The houses glowed with lights. People waved from porches. Somewhere, a record played an old Bing Crosby song, and someone burned cinnamon in the oven. The world was the same, but I wasn't. Back at the house, Anna brought out a final gift. It wasn't wrapped. It was Grace's scarf. "She left this for you," Anna said. I kept it. I didn't know when would be the right time. I took it, held it close. It smelled like cedar and memory. I wrapped it around my neck, and it felt like arms I hadn't felt in years. I closed my eyes and let the warmth reach somewhere I thought had gone cold forever. Later, after Nathan fell asleep with his toy car still in hand, after Anthony had gone to clean the dishes and Anna was upstairs folding blankets, I sat alone in the living room. The fire was low. The clock ticked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket. Grace's initials. Anna's. And now, mine too, etched faintly on the clasp by Anna's own hand. I held it tightly and whispered, "I'm here." And that was enough. Outside, just before midnight, the last bell rang. Soft. Gentle. Not loud. Not demanding. Just there. Like love that waited.